This podcast is powered by The Plug.
Hola, 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 mi gente. Buenos días, buenos tardes, buenas noches, salam, bon dia, hello. I hope everyone is doing well if you're having the opportunity to listen to this podcast. My name is Jules. I write a blog called Besos, Jules. I chose that name because everything I wrote felt very personal, and whenever I signed a text or an email, I always wanted to sign it with a lot of love. So Besos means kisses, and Jules is me. I had a podcast with my best friend, brother, James Bruinger Arreguin, who has since moved to New York to fulfill his dreams of being an absolute Disney Broadway master. He is going to change the world. So our podcast is on a little bit of a hiatus, but I thought that podcasting myself would give me a great opportunity to connect with the community and turn a new focus towards what my real passion is, and that is wellness. So a little bit about myself. My name is Julia, but I go by Jules. I studied psychology and Chicano studies in college. So the intersection of mental health and well-being and culture is very important to me. I spent 2 years studying at Metropolitan State University here in Denver, Metro. And then I transferred to the University of Denver, DU. And when I was studying psychology there, I found that it was really cliquey in terms of it was all research-centric, which is great. I believe strongly that we need all of the research. It's important to have clinical trials and real studies that demonstrate solid results because we need the science. But that's not where my interest lies. My interest is with patients or with people and connecting with them to help them achieve their best self, their highest self, so that they feel taken care of. But I realized that access is a huge problem. And so the conversation surrounding the BIPOC community and wellness is just one that we are not having. Therapy is expensive, and access to a lot of other mental health options are expensive and just not accessible. And so after working in mental health with the largest mental health organization, I'll spare the name for privacy purposes, but I thought, wow, this is so exciting because I'll be working with individuals that are super self-aware and focused on this and are passionate about, being kind to one another. No, it was the most toxic workplace I've ever worked in, and had it not been so crazy between COVID and a lot of personal traumatic things that were happening with my family's health and having to caretake, I probably would have seen that sooner, but I was so clouded with everything going on. I stuck it out for a year before finally leaving that job. But, I feel very fortunate for that opportunity because it really put me in close proximity with the majority of the legislation that is being made surrounding mental health in the United States. And I realized that all of it is diagnosis-based, and that, has its benefits and its disadvantages, to say the least. But the issue with diagnoses is that when we start to look at people as their diagnosis, we forget that they're human. And so I started listening to a lot of stories and doing a lot of research, especially for people who are hospitalized with mental health conditions, and they didn't feel seen. They didn't feel heard as people. And I thought, how on earth are people supposed to get better or achieve any sense of mental wellness or well-being if all they're categorized as, especially by the people who are providing the care, as their diagnosis? And so this kind of opened up my world to curiosity surrounding holistic health. Both of my parents are in medicine, and a question I get frequently is like, oh, you never wanted to be a doctor, you never wanted to go into medicine. And one, I've got insane ADHD, and so the amount of studying and schoolwork that is required to go to med school is just like not working for it. Would not bring me joy, right? But I also just don't love the pharmaceutical dominance that exists within Western medicine right now. Everything is about writing prescriptions and getting people on different drugs, and then we're just symptom treating. We're not finding the root of the problem. So I'm currently studying curanderismo, and for those who don't speak Spanish, that refers to traditional medicine, specifically within the Mexican culture and other Latin American cultures that often has a lot of African roots. So I am studying that now, and what I love is that they all try and get to the root of the problem, and a lot of that lies often in our emotional well-being, our spiritual well-being, our well-being and belonging within our community, that then is manifested through symptoms. So yes, we're seeing the symptoms, but like, what's really going on? And so back in the day when you would see these healers, for starters, they were not paid. You would pay in a goat or some sort of service, whatever your expertise was, right? It was trade work. But you were seen on a holistic level. The curandero or curandera for feminine, they were all, they were taking an approach holistically, or what we consider holistic health, and that is acknowledging spiritual health, mental health, emotional health, physical health, what are you eating, everything. And I think when we ignore that, we're doing ourselves a great disservice. And so my passion now really lies in getting back to traditional medicine and acknowledging our ancestral wisdom and really bringing that to light. Additionally, wellness has become an industry, and I think it's very important that we acknowledge that, because it's often, when we speak about wellness, we think of Gwyneth freaking Paltrow and Goop and Kourtney Kardashian with her blog, whatever, Poosh, and I don't know where they get these names or like why they have to rhyme, but they're bringing in, Goop is at 48 million a year for revenue, and so it's really important that we acknowledge that this is an industry, because just like anything else, we know the difference between like eating well versus like the industry of eating well, right? And so you and I, because we're familiar with that on a very like layman's term basis, we can see through the holes of advertisements and stuff. So as everything opens up, and I don't want to say post-pandemic, because there are absolutely many communities around the world who are still very much suffering from this pandemic, but as we step into a space that is pseudo-normalized or closer to what it was before the pandemic, I think we all woke up to what our lives really look like, and it gave us the opportunity to look deeper inwards and very closely at our lives and acknowledge that we're not just working machines. We cannot work like this. This is no longer sustainable. And I think it's great if we are additionally given the tools to figure out how to navigate those waters. But what I don't think is happening is that we've been given any sort of closure. Nobody's talking about our feelings that were happening during it, not to mention the civil rights crisis that was occurring at the same time. It has been a really heavy past several years. And so we all experience that together, and collective trauma is no joke. And I think it's really crucial that we acknowledge it in addition to our own personal traumas and our own personal mental health conditions or states of wellness, whatever you'd like to categorize it as, in our healing journey or in our journey of wellness or self-discovery or self-love. So that's where I come in. So let's step into a little bit of decolonization of wellness. If we look at the National Wellness Institute, which honestly I did not know existed until I did a little bit of research for the purposes of this podcast, but I'm familiar with different modalities that categorize wellness or different ways to connect with self-care in 6 different forms. And so the National Wellness Institute lists the 6 as occupational, physical, social, intellectual, spiritual, and emotional. And so it's important to acknowledge all of those 6 because, you could be totally intellectually stimulated, socially, flourishing, spiritually and emotionally, just vibing. But like if your physical health is taking a toll and maybe your job is like soul sucking, it's going to be pretty hard to achieve overall wellness. And so that isn't to say that you have to have, score of 100 in each of these sections by any means, but it is a guide to help us put some sort of framework around, well, I don't, in the event that I feel like I'm doing everything right, I exercise and I have a good, romantic partner, my job is good. Oh, well, maybe it's the spiritual part that's missing. It just helps give us clues, right? And so that we can look at each aspect of our life holistically. And for my blog, Besos, Jules, my slogan is a global approach to wellness. And I picked the term global because I really enjoy looking at health holistically, like I mentioned earlier, and looking at all parts of health, but also the different ancestral wisdoms from all sorts of cultures that we have to offer, but really paying homage to them and not culturally appropriating it and calling it my own, right? So I'm excited to be able to discuss more and more wellness practices that actually have ancient roots that aren't spoken about. For example, maybe you guys are familiar with the gua sha, which is a jade tool that women have been using as of recently, definitely on TikTok and Instagram, to do sort of like a skin scraping technique within their skincare routine, and it's great for lymphatic drainage. A lot of people are saying, oh, you don't even need fillers if you use that. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but there's definitely some improvement in terms of it's pulling away the water from your face. However, this is something that has ancient Chinese traditional medicine roots, and no one is really acknowledging that, and people are not highlighting, Chinese retailers to be able to buy these products from, and it's just being like taken by Sephora and being packaged and sold as something that's like new for your skincare. Gua sha was applied all over your body and is great for myofascial issues, to the point of where the scraping can be so rigorous and it will lift blood to the skin, very similar to techniques within cupping, if you're familiar with that. And so when we don't have those conversations about the ancestral roots that a wellness practice has, and then we're profiting off of it, we get into a really icky territory of taking something from the BIPOC community and once again appropriating it. So the focus here will always be to acknowledge our ancestral roots and offer different wellness practices from cultures that maybe you might not be familiar with. I really look forward to connecting to individuals from various communities, especially here in Denver, to highlight those practices. So we've already covered that the wellness industry is an industry, and with that there has to be product sales, right? So I understand that we do, as businesses and as a business owner myself within the wellness space, have to sell things and make money. But I want to talk about the, place of products and the role that they can play within your life. If anyone is telling you that you need said product in order to achieve some sort of wellness or like your higher self, run. There is no one product, there is no one crystal, there is no one essential oil that is going to solve your problems. And so, yes, I think there is a role for certain products, certain things that can act as a catalyst or help you get in the mindset of, whatever wellness practice you're going to get into. And so I think it's important to acknowledge there's one, the placebo effect of like, oh, if I spray this mist, now I'm really in the mood to meditate or whatever. And maybe that's part placebo. But maybe it's also just about having a tangible object that you have placed an intention to. And so I really want to focus in on, you could find something that you already own and place an intention in it. Maybe you already have a couple of essential oils laying around and you put a couple drops in a bottle and you write meditation mist and you make that your own. You do not need to buy a bunch of products in order to step into some sort of wellness journey or wellness practice. So that is something that the wellness industry has really taken in terms of, oh, you're not well, let me sell you this product and you can be well. And then we get into this territory where it's all privilege based and it's all about access. And many people don't have access. And then there's wellness on Instagram. And this is what's really hard because Instagram is fantastic. I'm a content creator myself. I love the ability that social media has to spread information and invite us into communities that maybe we wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. But at the end of the day, it is also a product selling platform, whether you realize that you're being sold something or not. You are, especially with the influx of shops and badges and ways that you can spend money directly on the app, if not at minimum just being brought through a link to a third-party site in order to purchase something. And so they have made wellness very sexy. They have made wellness about smoothies and juices and being, very thin and fit and certain athletic wear and being on vacation and taking these beautiful photos and being in yoga poses, which, like, by the way, as a yogi myself, a lot of the photos of yoga that you see on Instagram are actually contortion. And it was a dear friend of mine and yoga teacher who really got me into it, Marie Gruichich, who was a dancer in Cirque du Soleil, and she brought it up on a retreat that I was on with her of saying that, these girls, like, this is straight up contortion. This is not yoga pose. And it was so good to hear that from her, who's like, she's incredibly flexible and she can reach those insane positions. But she was like, that's like Instagram modeling for yoga poses and like 4 different yoga brands is something completely different than the practice of yoga. And it was so good to hear that from her because I looked up to her so much and I thought, oh, well, okay, the epitome of being a yogi, you're like being successful in yoga or whatever that even means, is represented by being able to take these insane photos, and it's not. And so I want to be really clear about that. There's also like 7 other parts of yoga that is not just the physical practice, and that's a whole episode for another time. But, yoga is a lifestyle. It is not just about the physical practice. It's about the way that you treat people and the way that you spend your time and dedicate yourself to being of service and of self-study, etc. So beware of what you see on Instagram. You don't need to look a certain way in order to achieve wellness. Wellness doesn't look like anything. Wellness is going to look very unique and specific to you. So if you take away anything from this podcast, I hope it's that you're able to see through things that you see on Instagram now in terms of wellness, and see through when they're trying to sell you something, and see through when there's an image of wellness versus what it really is. And so I'll leave you all with a little journal prompt. I would like you to write down all of the preconceptions that you have surrounding wellness. And you can go ahead and be negative. Like, I don't believe in insane positivity, right? So go ahead. You can say it's of privilege. You can say it's, only for rich white ladies who can do yoga in the middle of the day. Like, whatever you think it is, I want you to write that down and be okay with it. There's no shame about the preconceptions that you have of it. And then I want you to write down the words that you associate with self-care. Do you have a difference of perception with that? Or is it kind of lie under the same category as wellness does? And then once you've acknowledged all of those feelings, I'd like you to ask yourself, do you feel you are deserving or worthy of self-care, of well-being? And this is hard because a lot of times we don't feel we're worthy. We feel like we need to produce a certain amount, or we need to achieve certain things throughout the week in order to deserve that time of rest. But rest is not something to be deserved. Rest is vital, in fact. So I really invite you all to invite more rest into your routine, into your lifestyle, and not feel like you have to deserve it. And in fact, our productivity is always increased when we're well rested. We can be better members of our community. We can be better partners, better mothers, daughters, whatever your relationships are. We are better when we are taken care of. And that is why self-care is not selfish. So please know that you are your own best healer, but you have to learn how. We aren't taught these skills, and we aren't always given the vocabulary or the skill set in order to know how to take care of ourselves. But what a beautiful opportunity as adults we have to learn that, and furthermore pass that on to the next generation, whether it's children of our own or nieces or nephews or just other kids in the community. It starts with us. So I love you. Thank you so much for listening. If you've got to the end here, please share this with your friends. Please DM me, send me topics that you'd like to hear about. I really look forward to interviewing people within the community to talk about wellness and their well-being. Let's connect. Thank you so much. Again, I love you. Besos.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you or your company are looking to jump into the podcast world, now is the time. The Plug Agency is here to connect you to the full power of podcasting. You just record and leave the rest to us. The people are listening and want to hear from you. Theplug-agency.com. That's theplug-agency.com. Click the link in the episode description for an exclusive offer.